Today is the fifth in our series of 10 spotlights on Black composers. Previous spotlights included Samuel Coleridge Taylor, Florence Price, Scott Joplin, and Nathaniel Dett. Today we spotlight Margaret Bonds, a Black American composer, pianist, arranger, and teacher who was born in 1913, making her our first featured composer born after 1900. Margaret Bonds showed an early aptitude for composition, writing her first work, Marquette Street Blues, at age 5. She began studying piano with her mother, and by the time she reached age 8, Margaret had progressed to studying at the Coleridge Taylor Music School. During high school, Margaret studied piano and composition with Florence Price. In 1929, at the young age of 16, Bonds began her studies at Northwestern University, where she was one of the few Black students at the time. The university's prejudicial policies meant that Margaret was not permitted to reside on campus, even though she was a student. Campus restaurants would not serve Margaret because she was Black. Despite the hostile, racist environment that she had to endure, Margaret thrived artistically during this time. In 1933, she not only earned her Bachelor of Music degree from Northwestern, but also performed as a soloist with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the first Black person in history to do so. Just 1 year later, in 1934, Margaret earned her Master of Music degree from Northwestern, and she was the featured pianist for the Women's Symphony Orchestra of Chicago, performing the Piano Concerto in D minor, composed by her former teacher, Florence Price. All of these accomplishments, and just barely 21 years old. In 1936, Margaret met the prolific African-American poet and writer Langston Hughes. The two would become great friends and would embark on many artistic collaborations throughout their lives. For example, in December 1960, CBS televised The Ballad of the Brown King, a Christmas cantata composed by Margaret Bonds with words by Langston Hughes. Originally written for voice and piano, the work was expanded into a 9-movement cantata featuring a chorus, vocal soloists, and full orchestra. The work focuses on the African king Balthazar, one of the Magi from the biblical story of Jesus' birth. The 9 movements combine elements of various Black musical traditions, including jazz, gospel, blues, and spirituals. For more on the friendship and artistic collaborations of Bonds and Hughes, go to the Georgetown University Library website, where you can find an exhibition entitled Margaret Bonds and Langston Hughes, A Musical Friendship. Margaret Bonds was quite successful during her lifetime, in high demand as a composer and performer. Her impressively versatile compositional output includes orchestral works, theatrical scores, choral works, vocal solos, cantatas, piano solos, and traditional African-American spiritual arrangements. Bonds was educated as a classical musician, but her work was strongly influenced by jazz and blues. Her compositions were performed by a large number of eclectic artists, including Leontine Price, Louis Armstrong, Marian Anderson, and Woody Herman. In 1964, Bonds composed her Montgomery Variations for orchestra, a set of 7 programmatic variations on the spiritual I Want Jesus to Walk With Me. You'll hear one of these variations later in today's service. The work was inspired by the 1965 Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to whom Margaret Bonds dedicated the work. Late in her life, Margaret moved to Los Angeles, teaching music at the Los Angeles Inner City Institute and Cultural Center. Zubin Mehta and the Los Angeles Philharmonic premiered her Credo for chorus and orchestra in 1972, just before her unexpected death at age 59. Margaret Bonds should be remembered as an important and influential composer of the 20th century. But it seemed until very recently that she had been largely forgotten. Louise Taupin, an opera singer and voice professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, notes that, quote, It's amazing that people don't know who she was, although she was quite well known in her time." Unquote. There are many complex reasons for this, including the fact that much of Margaret Bond's music, including the Montgomery Variations, were thought to have been lost forever. In 2017, the Montgomery Variations, as well as several other pieces by Bond, were found next to a dumpster, waiting to be thrown out. Perhaps this discovery will help to rekindle an interest in Margaret Bond's music. Indeed, our culture needs to be reacquainted with this great composer. I hope that today's spotlight will contribute, at least in a small way, toward that end.